Giant Ghoul boss fight. Fallout 4 almost had one of the most terrifying boss creatures in the game series. It was a 300-foot-tall glowing one called Maypole, and it was designed to look like a melting pile of toxic radiation that would have been accompanied by hordes of mindless, regenerating feral ghouls. The fight against this monster would have dwarfed anything the Fallout series had ever attempted. Behind this plan was character artist Jonah Loeb, who made the Maypole his passion project after drawing inspiration from the game Shadow of the Colossus and Alberto Giacometti's Walking Man sculpture. Loeb was so committed to the idea that he actually created a working model of the creature and tested it in Concord. Unfortunately, all that ambition ran headfirst into harsh technical reality. The simple truth is that a 300-foot-tall enemy with dozens of accompanying ghouls would have been a complete nightmare for the game engine to handle and would almost certainly cause performance issues. And so despite the efforts poured onto this boss fight, it was eventually cut from the game and shelved. To this day, the Maypole remains one of Fallout's most ambitious ideas that never saw the light of day. Bigger Strip. New Vegas was supposed to be a massive, beautiful casino district that would have been the crown jewel of the post-apocalyptic world. Early footage from E3 showed the Strip as one big area without loading screens, packed with more NPCs and surrounded by tall concrete walls with guard towers. But this grand vision crashed into the harsh reality of console limitations, especially the PlayStation 3's memory problems. The PS3's 512 megabytes of RAM was split between graphics and processing, requiring extra work that the development team was running out of time to do. But as late as 4 months before release, the E3 demo was still showing this bigger version, and so Obsidian had to make drastic changes. They added the infamous gates to break up the view, cut down on NPCs dramatically, and moved walls closer to hide unfinished areas. Producer Jason Bergman revealed that the PS3 was virtually unplayable until 6 weeks before they had to submit the game, running only at 10 frames per second with less than 45 minutes before crashing. The strip we got was still impressive, but it's a big compromise from the massive fancy cityscape that was originally planned. Underwater Vault. Vault 120 could have been one of the most unique locations in the entire Fallout series. Located off the coast of Massachusetts, this underwater vault would have been involved in a quest called 20 Leagues Under the Sea. In this quest, players would board the Yangtze submarine with Captain Zhao and crash straight into the vault's entrance bay. As you navigated through the residential areas and research stations, you'd eventually discover the vault's true secret. The Overseer was a sentient giant squid you'd have to fight in a special chamber in the vault. Facing off against this massive creature in the depths would have been incredible, especially considering Fallout has almost no underwater content anywhere in the series. And the most interesting part of this is that while you won't find any traces of this area in Fallout 4, the entire level was actually discovered in Fallout 76's game files years later. Bethesda had apparently copied the vault over when developing 76, which gave fans a chance to see what was actually built. The residential areas, airlocks, and that boss fight chamber were all mostly complete. There's even evidence the developers ran multiple playtests on the location. But despite all this work, something went wrong technically and the quest just did not work correctly. So rather than fixing it, Bethesda decided to cut the vault entirely from Fallout 4. Post-ending content in Fallout New Vegas. The second battle of Hoover Dam is the final act in New Vegas, and once you complete that mission, the game simply ends, and you can't continue playing. That means you're forced to reload a save from before the battle if you want to keep exploring the Mojave. Unfortunately, this also means you can never use the loot you earned in that climactic fight, and you can never see how the wasteland reacts to your choices. But this wasn't always the plan. Obsidian originally designed extensive post-game content where the world would change based on your decisions. Project director Josh Sawyer even revealed they always wanted to support post-Hoover play with the wasteland reacting to the player's choices, so the team had actually designed how different locations would change depending on which faction won. They created unused quests with variables for each major ending, and added NPC that had recorded dialogue for the post-game state.
No Mr. House, no NCR, no Legion, no rules. New Vegas is gonna be just one wild, never-ending party.
But this unfortunately never made it into the final version of the game because it was simply too much work for them. Writer Chris Avallone later explained that designing post-game content isn't actually that difficult if you actually plan it from the start. But that wasn't the case for New Vegas. Instead, they were simply going to add all these things later, and that would have been a nightmare in development. And so a few milestones before completion, it became clear they couldn't deliver the post-ending content for the game. So Sawyer made the difficult decision to cut it entirely, and instead focus on making the ending slides as detailed as possible. Combat Zone. This was supposed to be an underground fighting arena in downtown Boston where you could bet on matches and participate in organized fights. But what we got instead is a single shootout with some raiders where you recruit the companion Kate, kill a handful of enemies, and that's pretty much it. Now, the original design allowed players to participate in arena fights themselves or bet on matches between other fighters. This was similar to the Raider arena mechanics Bethesda later implemented in the Nuka World DLC, but even though it would have been an exciting addition to the game, it never made the final cut. So the disappointed and passionate players of Fallout took it upon themselves to save this section of the game. One modder named Barbaricia created the Combat Zone Restored mod and discovered something revealing when they tried to finish what Bethesda started. They found that practically nothing was working correctly with the original implementation, so it was virtually unplayable. And so it's no surprise that the original developers cut out this portion of the game entirely. Thankfully, thanks to dedicated fans and talented modders like Barbaricia, we can now experience a glimpse of what Bethesda originally envisioned, a fully functional combat zone that finally lives up to its potential. Downtown DC. Bethesda originally planned the DC ruins to be twice as large, with 26 different neighborhoods connected by metro tunnels. Each area was designed to have its own personality and unique gameplay, including places like Chevy Chase, Adams Morgan, and DuPont Circle, all based on real Washington, D.C. locations. As late as September 2007, only a year before Fallout 3 launched, artist Adam Adamowicz was still designing neighborhoods. But this was only a small portion of the bigger dilemma they were facing. You see, the main problem was both simple and complicated. The developers realized that the metro map was too complex since players couldn't figure out which station they were in or how anything connected. And so even though designer Emil Pagliarulo confirmed that these neighborhoods were actually finished and polished already, game director Todd Howard had to make the tough call to cut over half of them. Then, whatever remaining areas left had to be hastily reconnected in ways that didn't really make sense. This was a painstaking process too, because the situation got so chaotic. The developers literally had to spread printouts of neighborhoods on their office floor and connect them with string just to figure out the new layout. While cutting the neighborhoods was necessary to make the game work, you can still find traces of what could have been. Hidden roads, blocked metro entrances, and mysterious map markers that hint at how much bigger DC was supposed to be. Slanter. The original Fallout almost featured talking raccoons that could hold conversations with players. These creatures, called the Slanter, or possibly the Rackree, were raccoons that had been exposed to FEV. They gained intelligence before the Great War, and learned how to speak through the scientists that were studying them. Unfortunately, one of Fallout's original creators, Tim Kaine, disliked the idea of talking raccoons that lived in a hollow tree because it reminded him of Keebler elves from cookie commercials. Kaine felt that it was too cartoonish, and didn't fit Fallout's overall tone. He had the same problem with Deathclaws, and believed these creatures should remain frightening killing machines rather than being turned into sympathetic characters. And so the Slanter were cut very early in development as part of Kaine's broader decision to remove all talking animal concepts from the game. But ironically, talking animals did eventually appear in later Fallout games after Kaine left Interplay, including the intelligent Deathclaw he had opposed. However, the talking raccoons remained an idea that was never realized. Van Buren. While this last entry is technically a cancelled game rather than cut content, I just had to include it in the video. Black Isle Studios was working on their own version of Fallout 3, called Van Buren, when money problems at Interplay killed the project in December 2003. Unlike Bethesda's later first-person version, this would have used a top-down view like the original games, with both turn-based and real-time combat. The story for the game was set in 2253 across the American Southwest, where you would have played as a prisoner who escapes during a mysterious attack on their prison. From there, you would have uncovered a plot involving a mad scientist named Presper who wanted to use a space satellite called BOMB-001 to launch nuclear missiles and wipe out the world's survivors. As the story unfolded, you would have discovered that Presper had released a deadly virus near Boulder and Denver. This triggered an AI called Odysseus to fill a prison with infected people before launching his plan to destroy humanity. The most interesting part of the game was that Van Buren would have let you play as humans, ghouls, or super mutants, giving way more character choices than any other Fallout game. Interestingly, many ideas from Van Buren eventually made it into Fallout New Vegas, including Caesar's Legion, the war between the NCR and Brotherhood of Steel, and badass companion Joshua Graham. A playable demo was released years later, showing off the game's look and gameplay. But what was the reason it was cut in the first place? Well, during the game's development, Timothy Kaine was brought in to assess how long the project would take to finish. Kaine estimated that it was worth 12 to 18 months of work, to which Interplay responded was too long considering they already had financial troubles, and as much as it broke everyone's hearts, Van Buren was forever shelved, making it one of the gaming industry's biggest what-ifs. So what do you think? Should Fallout have kept some of these wild cut ideas? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.